This real-side experience would begin with me travelling in a car. I would be in the back seat, two other individuals present, one as the driver, the other sitting in the front also in the other available seat. If we find ourselves sat in vehicles on the real side, be they stationary or mobile, this represents generally that we are sitting in an idea which could be beneficial as much as it could be detracting awareness speaking. The vehicle could also represent a particular body vehicle we are sitting within, the emotional or mental vehicle say, and oftentimes the additional hints as to this being so may be the vehicle's overall colour, with red representing the emotions or astral vehicle, blue as the mental bodies, purple the ethereal, etc. Dwayne has often spoken of the importance of carrying no idea with us, regardless of its nature, even a beneficial intent. For all intents, desires and wants will manifest themselves at some stage, as everything will always be that which it is, will always be the instant effect of itself in isness reality terms, although through decided creational mechanics, with the additional idea factors of time and space, will such take the moments as it will to manifest on the physical. On the real side, I instantly can manifest a house. On the physical, so it has been decided through consciousness that to construct such has certain requirements, and the various stages take the illusory time that they do, as every action is coupled with a certain spatial distance, equally as illusory, that must be traversed with an agreed-to duration of time for the desired action's accomplishment. And so, ideas as we hold to them will express as us sitting in vehicles on the real side, not necessarily awareness debilitating, as it may simply be a verification of, say, a certain focus that is life beneficial. And although we wouldn't ideally hold on to ideas, we would release them and let them effect their outcomes, certain focuses will be a constant, and applied focus would be as much an idea as any other, and can be represented with finding ourselves present in vehicles on the real side, with the ultimate focus being that which is placed with the ears, the idea of it through the personal self, but the reality of it becoming as eventual is recognition with such a focus and real intent maintained. Dwayne, as an example, once shared a real side experience of sitting in a red car, and although he recognized this as representing the astral vehicle, he also construed this as denoting a passion through the personal self for his presenting of the true reality in creation. Positioning in the vehicle is significant also. Were it our own created idea, we would find ourselves at the wheel. In the cases where we are not driving the car, then the idea is not our own, but rather that of the driver, which we are in agreement with. But again, ideas can be beneficial as much as detrimental and destructive, and so it pays to determine the identity of the driver to afford further hints as to the nature of the idea we are in agreement with. As many times I have found myself as a passenger, but with a Dwayne or a guide at the wheel, and having determined them to be the genuine individuals through real awareness impressions, we can be assured that our agreement with their idea is one which benefits life. And so vehicles can be representational, or they could simply be the chosen simulated means of traversing a distance in whatever context that may be. This real side experience then, opening up in a car scene, though one not designed as an afforded situation by a guide to impress upon me something to be aware of, more so an idea in consciousness that I was viewing for whatever reason, as the consciousness has stored everything we ever have experienced throughout all our lifetimes, and really then it's just a case of dusting off an old life DVD and playing it, as on the real side we have potentially full access to the consciousness, and indeed this experience had the sense of being a previous lifetime, and so it would appear to be then a creational position, dimension, or lifetime not so dissimilar to my current one, as we were travelling in what seemed to be a car, myself and those present appearing to be human, or at least human enough, as I didn't really scrutinise the body forms. The sense was that I was the child of a family, those in the vehicle's front being my parents, and additionally would I have a pet of some kind with me. The pet was of a species that I have no current lifetime personal memory reference for, description defying, in other words. So as much as there were similarities with my current human lifetime now, there were differences. The closest approximation would be a kind of a glowing tubular-like form with fin-like appendages. The creature would rather float as though lighter than the air. At one point during the journey, the creature, the exotic pet, would die. Although it seemed in this world, dimension, creational position, the beings there, that which I was in this past life glimpse, had the ability to see the awareness remove itself from the physical body when it transpired. For indeed, any ability is possible with a species. It's just a case of it being collectively decided, inserted as an idea agreement in the consciousness, and it becomes so. And so, as I watched, which would be then a situation not out of the ordinary for such a species that I was, the floating, tubular body form would descend, come to rest on the car seat. It would glow as though another body form that was identical was superimposed upon it briefly, then that would be gone also, as though the awareness animating through it momentarily held the form of its physical vehicle shell before relocating to whatever position was next for it. Despite the fact that it was very apparent that on death of the physical body form there was something else, some animating essence that was maintained, whatever the species terminology and reference may have been for it, this still was traumatic for the being that I was in the past life experience, being rather young, as I said. However, it did suggest a species that would be far more creationally aware than humans, as they evidently had a body design that could see beyond just the physical level, which would have, in the very least, the acceptance of a life beyond death of the body form. We would reach our destination, the scene would skip, and I would be inside a building that was apparently my home. I didn't pay much attention to the details of it, as we tend not over consider that which we are familiar with, this being a past life glimpse, as I said, but the overall sense was that it was a very gloomy and ill-lit abode, and yet this didn't pose as a problem. It suggested the visual senses of the species were very developed, to the extent that not only could they see beyond the physical, observe the awareness exiting body forms, etc., but that artificial illumination wasn't necessary either, as though their eyes were more designed for darkness. And now it was also revealed that this species were of a technological persuasion also, for it seems it was a standard to record all memories of each individual, including pets, as though the current lifetime of the experiences stored in the memory body could be accessed, and continuously so, from birth to death, and stored in technology, and then viewable for whatever reasons it was desired. I imagine this rather would be a good method of ascertaining guilt with crimes, for one would simply access all the suspect's memories, and the truth would be laid bare. But it seemed another species standard was that on the departure of awareness from a pet's body form, that a traumatized child could then watch on a large screen, not unlike a television, all the recorded experiences of themselves and their pet, evidently aware to an extent as a species, technological, yes, a recognition of an animating force that is through the physical body, but still retaining emotional attachment to the idea, the creation, that which is the body form. And realistically, just as with any idea, we ought endeavour to not cling to the idea of the body forms, rather to just let them be, or we can somewhat lock ourselves into a karmic entanglement with the individuals whose body forms they are, continuously drag each other back into further lifetimes, etc., where in reality no one goes anywhere. We are all this awareness everything that is here and now, and only from the perspective of the body form mechanics does it appear individuals are entering and exiting our experience. As a single idea clung to can keep you in creation, for we then are choosing to experience the effect of it, which can only be so in a position other than the isness everything, which are the simulators. So it is that emotional attachment to body forms which are effected from a consciousness which comprises of ideas, the idea creations of the personal self-individual. These then are the very ideas that can have us resigned to a creation if we are unable to release them, to let the individual, the created self, go. During this viewing of the experiences recorded in regards to my pet, my parents present also would additionally be another individual, somewhat out of place, as though he didn't strictly belong in the physical scene, as though during what was a re-experiencing of this past life scene, this additional individual would have as though been the equivalent of a ghost. This individual I then would pay attention to, appearance-wise, and seems it was my now deceased grandfather from this current lifetime. As I said, these beings, the species I once was, had very developed sensory ability. They could see beyond the physical, etc. They certainly would have been able to then see beings that are operating on life levels and dimensions other than their own, and indeed, despite then individuals featuring that were not physical level based, this would simply have been taken in their stride, nothing out of the ordinary then, and with whatever considerations they may have applied to such situations where extra-dimensional beings may have featured. My impressions on waking later would be that this out-of-place individual, one who wasn't physical level based, but observable from my perspective as a child, was very likely a real guide, and perhaps during that lifetime, whichever dimension, place in creation it may have been, I may not have recognized what the guide represented, a true reality agent operating as a lifeline to the isness he stands with while operating in creation, and it seems as a dimensional being he did feature in my physical level experiences relatively frequently, and indeed on this occasion, as I watched the recorded experiences of my pet with my parents, would he be present, as I said, and affording comfort. I'm uncertain how in that lifetime and body form exactly I considered this real guide, as no ideas would really surface at the re-experiencing of this scene which revealed my considerations in regards to him. Very likely, as a child, I didn't over-consider it, just accepted it, that this was a friend who occasionally manifested. On awaking, my impressions were that not only was this individual a real guide, but that, just as real guides will do, they will begin to watch those who show indication of preparing to begin their processes of awareness and ease recognition. As a human and other body forms that perhaps lack awareness, or indeed extrasensory ability, so would the presence of the guides be unrealized. But for this species, able to see beyond the physical as they were, so could potentially real guides feature directly in their physical experience, though operating from other dimensions, if they felt it prudent to do so. That perhaps I wasn't quite ready yet for the opportunity of the ears in that lifetime, but moving in that intent direction, that the real guide was at least making himself known, and perhaps would be extending a few references to test the water, so to speak, to slowly ease me into a consideration of that which is aside from creation and the body worlds. As I said, he had the appearance of my grandfather, now deceased, in the re-experiencing of the past lifetime scene, and obviously that would not have been the form of my grandfather from that lifetime. In real side experiences I have shared, the guides often take the forms of parental figures, especially my grandfather, and so either it was a case that even though it was a re-experiencing of a past lifetime scenes, that the guide chose to assume a form he would later adopt lifetimes later in my current lifetime of real side experiences, or that the experience was altered slightly, that the form the guide took was that of my grandfather, just to impress upon me the fact that it was indeed a guide once featuring in my physical level experiences in whatever lifetime it once was. The experience was brief, a past lifetime glimpse, as I said, of other body forms and species as they decide what they do, create their consciousness accordingly, and effect whatever simulation for themselves as a result. But additionally, it verifies how the guides will move through a creation generally unseen, watching for individuals who show signs of readiness to be approached, and at the earliest opportunity so will they feature, either on the real side with the individual, maybe even physical level manifesting, or in this case, taking advantage of a species' ability to perceive dimensions beyond the physical and feature in that way. And then it's rather a case of taking the individual step by step lifetime by lifetime, until the moment they are ready to be presented with the idea of the ears, in whatever form and situation that may take.
That was cool, Kevin. A lot of fun. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.